Welcome back, everyone. Today's story is real, but it sounds like something straight out of a movie. A story that baffled Japanese police, confused prison guards, and even left security experts completely stunned. Because our main character today didn't rob a bank, and he didn't plan some grand heist. Instead, he did something almost impossible. This man managed to escape from Japan's most secure and notorious prisons not once, not twice, but 4 times in total. And each time, he came back with a plan even smarter and bolder than before. A man whose name became a legend in Japan, known to everyone as the escape artist. But before we dive into his unbelievable journey, make sure to support the channel by subscribing and hit that like button, so we can keep bringing you more true stories that sound too wild to be real. Our story begins in 1936 in the northern part of Japan, specifically in the city of Aomori. There lived a man named Yoshie Shiratori, an ordinary man who disliked violence and trouble, with no criminal record or history in the courts. But one day, his entire life turned upside down. Shiratori was accused of a murder he never committed. Even though he denied the charges in every possible way, the court still sentenced him to life imprisonment. At first, Yoshie was hopeful. He believed that the truth would eventually come out, that justice would prevail, and he'd be proven innocent. But what he experienced behind bars completely shattered that belief. The interrogations were brutal, and the torture never stopped. The guards treated him with inhuman cruelty, beating him and leaving him for days without food. With every passing day, the feeling of injustice grew stronger inside him until he became convinced that the road to justice was blocked and that escape was the only way to survive. But Yoshie wasn't just another prisoner. He was calm, quiet, and unusually intelligent. He began observing everything inside the prison. The guards' schedules, their shift changes, even the sound of their keys as they opened and closed the cells. He studied every tiny detail as if drawing a mental map, a map that could lead him to freedom. Yoshie spent long months planning, patiently and quietly, studying every tiny detail of the prison with precision, until the long-awaited dawn finally came. On a cold winter morning in Japan, just before sunrise, Yoshie pulled out a thin metal wire he had hidden inside a bucket of water in his cell. With fingers stiff and frozen from the cold, he began trying to pick the iron lock. Every second felt like an hour, but after endless attempts and a tense battle with time, the lock finally clicked open. Moving cautiously through the dark corridors, Yoshie opened the remaining doors one after another with the same clever precision until he reached the final door leading to freedom. But before leaving, he made a brilliant move. He placed a wooden stick under his blanket on the bed, shaping it to look like a sleeping body. So when the guard came to check the cell, he saw the raised blanket and assumed Yoshie was still asleep. What he didn't know was that Yoshie Shiratori was already far away, running through the cold night, chasing his first taste of freedom. But Yoshie's joy didn't last long. Just 3 days after his escape, he was caught in a hospital trying to steal some tools. He was sent back to prison, this time with a life sentence. After a while, he was transferred to Akita prison, where the darkest chapter of his life began. The guards already knew his history, so they punished him more harshly than any other inmate. They made him sleep on the cold floor with no blanket and locked him inside a narrow, solitary cell. The walls were made of smooth copper, impossible to climb, and the ceiling was so high that only a faint ray of light came through a tiny opening. But despite all the cruelty, there was one guard who was different, Kobayashi. He would sometimes show Yoshie small acts of kindness, checking on him and asking how he was doing. Maybe that tiny bit of compassion was what kept Yoshie holding on to hope, a reminder that there was still some humanity left in the world. Months passed until one stormy night in June 1942, when the guards came for their nightly inspection, they found Shiratori's cell empty. The shackles were there, but unlocked. Everyone was shocked. Escaping from a copper cell was supposed to be impossible. But Shiratori, with his calm mind and sharp intelligence, had secretly hidden a small wire which he used to unlock the chains. For months, he had been loosening the wooden frame of a small window high above. And when the thunderstorm hit that night, he used the sound of the rain and thunder to mask his movements and escaped once again into the darkness. After 3 long months of running and hiding, something truly strange happened. In the middle of the night, prison guard Kobayashi heard a faint knocking on his door. When he opened it, he froze in disbelief. Standing right there in front of him was Yoshie Shiratori himself. Yoshie looked thin and exhausted. His face was pale, his eyes hollow from hunger and fatigue. But the strangest part wasn't how he looked, it was why he was there. He hadn't come to hide or to escape again. He came of his own free will. With a calm and steady voice, he said to Kobayashi, "I didn't escape to live as a criminal. I escaped because I'm innocent, and I want to face true justice." Kobayashi stood there, speechless. Deep down, he believed Yoshie. His words felt sincere, but fear held him back. He knew if he made the wrong move, the consequences could destroy his career. So, reluctantly, he picked up the phone and called the police. Moments later, officers arrived and took Yoshie back to prison, ignoring everything he had said. And this time, they added 3 more years to his sentence. After some time, he was transferred to Abashiri Prison, deep in the far north of Japan, one of the harshest and most notorious prisons in history. His cell was made entirely of iron. It was tiny, freezing cold, and pitch dark. The shackles on his hands and feet weighed more than 20 kilograms, and he was rarely allowed to bathe. His meals were so small and plain that they barely kept him alive. Yet despite all this suffering, Yoshie never lost hope. He began to notice that the salt in his food was slowly reacting with the metal around him. That's when he had his brilliant idea. Every day, he sprinkled the leftover salty soup on his shackles and on the iron frame of the window. And as days turned to weeks and weeks into months, the metal began to rust and weaken, little by little. Then, after months of patience and planning, on a rainy night in 1944, he finally broke free. He removed his shackles, opened the window, and crawled through a narrow opening into the cold darkness outside. That night, Yoshie Shiratori became the first man in history to escape from the legendary Abashiri prison. After his escape, he disappeared into the mountains, living alone inside an abandoned mine, surviving by hunting wild animals and eating forest fruits, completely cut off from people and from the world itself. By the end of World War II, in 1945, Yoshie finally came down from the mountains, exhausted, starving, and barely able to stand. He stumbled upon a tomato farm, hoping to grab a few bites to survive. But the farmer saw him, shouted, and refused to let him take anything. A struggle broke out, and it ended with a single stab. The farmer was struck and died instantly. Moments later, the police caught Yoshie once again. He was charged for murder for the 3rd time, and this time, they sent him to the infamous Sapporo prison. Inside, Yoshie told the guards a line that would go down in history. "You might think you've locked me up for good, but believe me, I'm going to escape from here no matter what." The guards laughed and mocked him, not realizing that his words weren't a threat, they were a promise. Inside his tiny cell, Yoshie began digging the floor quietly, using nothing but his meal plate. Every single day, just a little more, unnoticed, patient, and determined. Weeks later, his persistence paid off. He dug a tunnel beneath his bed and crawled through a narrow hole to freedom. When the guards came for inspection, they found his cell empty. The shackles lay on the ground, the bed neatly arranged, but Yoshie was gone, vanished without a trace. This was his fourth escape, and with it, Yoshie Shiratori proved once and for all why he truly deserved the title of the King of Prison Escapes. After years of running, exhaustion, and hunger, Yoshie began to feel his age. His whole life had become one long escape. In 1948, he sat on a bench in the street, tired, broken, and with no strength left to keep fleeing. A young police officer approached him, sat down beside him, and offered him a cigarette. That simple gesture felt deeply human to Yoshie. It moved him, because it was the first time he had ever seen a policeman treat him like a person. He lifted his head and said quietly, "My name is Yoshie Shiratori. I escaped from prison 4 times. In that moment, Yoshie surrendered, calmly and even with a faint smile. This time, everything changed in court. Post-war Japan had become a different country, more humane, more just. The judges sympathized with him. They saw that the murder he had committed was an act of self-defense, and that his repeated escapes were the result of torture and inhumane treatment. His death sentence was reduced to only 8 years in prison, and he was transferred to Fuchu prison in Tokyo. There, he lived quietly. He never tried to escape again. After serving his sentence with respect, discipline, and kindness, he was finally released. After his release, Yoshie returned to his hometown in Amori, where he reunited with his daughter and lived a simple, peaceful life until his death in 1979. Today, he is remembered across Japan as the King of Escape, the man who broke free from 4 of the country's toughest prisons. Not because he was a criminal, but because he was a man who refused to break, no matter how heavy the chains became.